Hey guys, in this video let's discuss the importance of AnimNotifyStates. We mainly use two types inside our animation when we want to trigger certain events or visual effects, or maybe also sounds like footsteps and stuff like that. But for the AnimNotifyState, we have, like the name already states, a so-called AnimNotifyState. So it has a begin point and an end point. Maybe during a specific time frame inside your animation, for example, you want to open up a door or you have a reload animation, you don't really want to move, so maybe you want to disable the movement during this specific time frame. Or maybe you don't have any lower body animation, so for a reload you only have the upper body animation, so you can layer blend per bone during that specific animation. So let me show you how to set this one up properly. Okay, so now after waiting for a couple of hours just to create this fresh new project inside Unreal Engine 5.8, we can now finally go into the content drawer here and open up the third person folder, the blueprints folder, and then we can open up the third person character blueprint. So let's open up this character BP, and inside the event graph here you can find just an empty spot and just right click and let's search for the R key, and let's scroll down because I want to find the R key. So there it is. Let me just click on that and then drag off of pressed, and we want to play an anim montage. So we want to reload by pressing R during the game, but we don't have any anim montage for that. So what we're going to do, we jump back into the content folder, go to characters, mannequins, and then let's go to anims, pistol, and here next to pistol you have all the animations. So next to equip and fire and dry fire and idle, you're also going to have the mm_pistol reload by default. So let me just right click here because I want to use this one as an anim montage, and then hit create anim montage. And we're going to call this one am_pistol_reload. And then let me just get this one here, drag and drop inside our play anim montage, and let's compile and save. So we need to go back before we can start this, but before we can trigger this properly, we need to open up our am_pistol_reload we just created. And inside here you can find, let me just pause this and put this to the very first frame first. So you can see that we do have a default group default slot. But I want to put this slot name and switch this to upper body because I don't have any lower body. Okay, so this is completely normal because he's not finding any bones now. But for this specific animation, we only have the upper body animation, but we also want to move during the reload. But this is going to look pretty weird, so we want to blend the bones. And this is why we can use the AnimNotifyState to blend our upper body with our lower body together. So we have the locomotion and we have only the upper body playing the reload during this specific time frame inside our animation. And after that, we will just go back to full body animation for our locomotion. So please make sure that you switch this to upper body during your anim montage, reload anim montage. So once you have that, let's save. And then you go back to your BP third person character. I want to create a new variable here, so let's click on the plus and we call this one b, like a small b for bool, and then you can call this one, for example, upper body only. So this is going to be our state. So maybe you think, hey, why don't we just get this one and we set this to true? Okay, so you could actually do that. Actually you cannot, but some people think it's possible. You're just going to set this one, and then after playing the anim montage you can just deselect or just set this back to false. So this should work, right? No, it's not going to work because everything fires immediately. There's a much simpler and much more effective way, which is also quite procedural. For every type of animation, we're going to use the AnimNotifyState, and it's much cleaner. So let me just remove the bool, and when we go back to our content drawer here, let me right click inside my animation pistol and let's get a blueprint, and we get the blueprint class. And here I'm going to search for all classes, and let me search for AnimNotifyState. So let's just get the AnimNotifyState here. Let's click select, and I'm going to call this one ans_reload, or let's say upper body only. So we can use this for maybe opening up the door. You can use this later in your game for basically anything. So we're going to open this one up. And what you can find here is now next to functions override, you have now a begin and a received end. And this is what matters. So let's click on begin and let's unhook this one, alt and click here. And let me just put this up. So we want to, from here, cast to the BP third person character. Okay. But in order to have this object, otherwise you're going to get an error or a warning, it's never going to find anything. You want to get the mesh component and get the owner of that. So the owner would be our character. And we're just going to hook this one up here. and let me just drag select, press Q to straighten everything. And then from here, you can now access the bool, which is the upper body only. So let me set this one. When we start with our animation, we want to set this one to true. Okay, so upper body is now being ticked, and we can use its return value here if we want to, and then compile and save. And then just select everything here in between, Control C, and we go and click here next to override. We want to also open up the received and notify end. Let me unhook this one also, and we can put this one inside here, and then hook this one up into the cast node. And also the mesh component needs to be connected to the owner, otherwise he's never going to find it. And then after that, we can just, for the sake of it, you don't really need to do it, but I'm just going to do it for now. Set this one to true and hook this one up to the return node, and then compile and save. But you must not forget here the upper body only on end, you need to be disabled, because when our animation has been played, the upper body is now being disabled. So we only want to use the upper body during the animation. When this is a received end, we want to go back to full body animation. Okay, so this is now being set up for you. This is basically everything you need to do for your animation notify state. So you can close this one down. And what we can do now inside our animation montage is under notifies, you're going to have different track channels. So inside this first notify channel, right click here and let's add a notify state. And this AnimNotifyState, we can now use our own ANS upper body only. And here now we can see I can drag the beginning and also the end here. So I want to have the upper body only being played during this whole animation time frame. So the whole animation montage has now only the upper body being affected. Okay, so this is pretty important. But there's one thing we need to do, otherwise it's never going to trigger. Of course, we need to go also to our characters, mannequins, anims, unarmed, and this is the default animation blueprint. This is the blueprint the third-person character is always going to use by default. So open up the ABP_unarmed. And what you're going to do here is we go to the event graph, and here you can see in the beginning on event blueprint initialize animation, he's always going to cast two characters. So when we play the game, he's always going to, not really always, once we start the game, he's going to cast this once. Okay, and we have now a reference to our character, but we also need to have a reference to our third person character itself. So what we're going to do here is you can drag off of here and cast to BP third person character. So let's do this one also. Once you did that, you can right click here and promote this one to a variable, and you call this one your BP the third person character, for example. And now you always have a reference here. So once you start the game, you can always access any type of function or bools, all that stuff. You can just access this from here. This means once we compile and save, we can now, next to our sequence here, you can see we have a sequence, and I just want to add this here next to is falling. So let me just get the BP third person character. And from here, let me get the upper body only bool. So now we can access this here from our character. And I need to create the same variable inside here. So let me just create a new variable here also. And we call this one B upper body only. So now we're transferring data and we set this one instead. So this one we created inside. We set this one with the state we have inside our character. So now this always gets an update every single time we trigger this one inside our character. So compile and save. So now we can realize everything is connected. So inside our character, we have the animation notify state being played inside our animation. And then once it triggers and we have the upper body only being false or being true in this state, it gets now converted or transferred here to our upper body only inside our animation blueprint. Now, when we go next to event graph, we go to main states. Let me just switch from main states to anim graph. Okay, so inside our animation graph, we need to do a couple of things in order to make this work. First of all, let me get some space here. We don't really need the control rig and all that stuff, but it needs to be connected to our output. So now the good thing about the locomotion is we have already a cache here being set up, so we don't need to do it luckily. This is a cache, right? So right click here and let's type in use cache. And then you're going to find something called use cache pose locomotion, okay? So like I said, this is already being set up for us. Pretty cool stuff. So first of all, when we drag off of here, we want to blend poses by a bool, okay? And every single time we play our reload animation, we know that this one is true during that state. And after this, we set this back to false. So when we drag and drop this one inside, we get the upper body only and put this into the active value. But when this is being active, our true pose needs to have this slot, upper body slot. Okay, so we need to use this one. When we have this one being false, so we're not reloading, we just get the cache, so you can just Control C and V, copy this one, and this is now our false pose. Okay, so we don't really need any type of slot, upper body or default group. We don't need anything here, so only for the upper body only. You only want to make sure that we have the upper body slot being played out. And then after that, we need to actually layer blend per bone. So just search for layered blend per bone. This is something we need to do also. For the layered blend per bone, when you click on that, on the right hand side, you have something under config called layer setup. When you open this one up, you have an index, and you can open up the index, the branch filter, and you click on the plus here. Once you click on the plus, he's going to ask you for a bone, basically a bone name. And you can simply type in, this works best, you can try for yourself, but the specific type of bone name for upper body, or let's say you want to blend your legs and only want to have the upper body animation for reload or opening up a door or something, the spine _02 works best. You can also set up a blend depth, so this means the bone next to it, underneath or maybe above the spine 02 is also getting some effect of that. If you want to have a blend depth, you can use something like 2 or 3 just to smooth it out a little bit. But for this one, it's perfectly fine. Now you have to keep in mind our spine _02, everything above the spine, okay, is gonna get played, and everything beneath that we're gonna blend with our base pose. So for our blend pose, okay, we hook this one up inside here to our blend poses, and the base pose is not gonna change. So we can simply use this main state if you want to, or just get another cache. It doesn't really matter, it's the same thing, but for our base pose, nothing is gonna change. We just keep playing this one. Okay, so the only thing is going to change is we only use the blend poses once we use the upper body as a bool. And when we use the upper body as a bool, and this is true, we use the locomotion with our upper body slot. So our animation montage, our reload montage is going to get recognized during this state. So now we can simply just hook this one up like so, and then compile and save. So now this should look like that. And now when we play, I can now run, and if I press R, the reload montage is getting played, but our locomotion is not gonna stop, okay? So this is the whole benefit of using AnimNotifyStates. In this case, we can use blend per bone. We don't need any animation for our lower body, and everything is working fine. Let me just unhook everything we just built here inside our animation. And let me just get this one like it was before. So this is the setup we had before, and compile and save. Sorry, we have this one here. The slot upper body was also connected. Sorry for that. So this is basically now without the bool being active. We just set up earlier. And now see what happens when we press R for reload without using the actual bool. Okay, so now I can run around, and when I press R, you can see that I'm floating, because you can see he's using the whole animation. The whole reload animation, and it doesn't have any locomotion. You can see here, nothing is going on down there. So let me just delete this one. And the logic we created earlier inside our anim graph. Now we have our upper body being respected. So our true pose is the slot upper body. And when this is getting played, we have now the blend pose here, and we only play the spine _02 for this specific animation. So let me hit play, and again I can reload, and this is how you basically blend punching animations, reload animation, or maybe any type of animation you only want to have an effect, or you maybe only have animation for upper body. You are now good to go. So this is basically it. This is how we can properly use AnimNotifyStates. works best for those types of animations when you want to blend basically only the upper body. Or you can also use different logic inside this animation notify state. Maybe you want to disable the input during this time frame inside this animation, or you want to increase the speed, or you want to decrease the speed of your movement. This is all possible. You can also trigger events, you can trigger effects, and you can also trigger any type of state you have inside your character. So yeah, thanks for watching.